people messaging the account thinking that like Elon Musk was actually behind it, and they would be asking for money, or they'd be telling me about their illnesses, or they would be offering invention ideas. One guy had a solar powered rocket ship that was going to take us all around the universe. Do you get those type of interactions?
Yeah, whatever
as well?
you got, imagine that times 100. Definitely. A lot of, women who want to go on dates, people who want money, people complaining about their Tesla and wanting me to escalate it for them. Just crazy stuff.
So, Board Elon, thank you for joining us and welcome to another episode of the Web3 Experience. Excited to get into a talk today about all things gaming, factions, the future of blockchain-based gaming. I'm your host, Mosey.
And I'm Freelance.
And welcome to the show.
Web3 Experience.
First, if we could get, a little background about your journey as a businessman into social media, into gaming. Just kind of give a rundown for our viewers to get a better sense of who you are.
A lot of people know me as Board Elon Musk on Twitter. I go by Board. My friends call me Board. Sort of wanted to identify myself as a unique person, but I started off obviously as a parody of a very famous person who now owns the platform that I built my following on, which I never would have expected. But have basically lived a parallel life for the last 10 years. One was as this pseudonymous identity who shares lots of inventions and funny ideas and commentary on technology and crypto and gaming and so many other things. And I spent a lot of time in the real world in the gaming industry. So I spent most of my time actually working for one of the largest Japanese gaming companies in history, helped launch several pieces of hardware and software, storied franchises, super fun. But I decided to leave that in 2021 because I saw the potential for blockchain technology in gaming, and we can certainly talk more about that. But I definitely was able to kind of marry my professional interests and my personal interests over time. And the Board Elon Musk today is a little different than what this started as, which was like a satirical character, very one-dimensional. And Board today, the one that you're talking to, is more of a hybrid of the real person behind the mask and the character that was once created. So in terms of gaming, I think that's just an area that I know very well. It's a personal passion of mine. And while many people have focused on blockchain technology from like a DeFi perspective, finance, other things, I really am excited about the applications for gaming. And because it's a space I know very well, that's where I'm focusing my attention today.
Wow. Was that tough, like finding that balance of creating this character or persona and then kind of merging it with yourself? Like, did you feel like you were, having a split personality or something, like anything like that?
For sure. And at first it was a bit difficult to kind of accept this idea that this fictional character that I created is actually way more famous and accomplished than the real person behind it. But then it was a really nice place to be because I felt free. I felt creative freedom. I like to tell people like the reason to be anonymous or pseudonymous is that so you can basically operate in a way that you don't feel scared of failing or of looking stupid. There's a lot of negativity around the idea of anonymity because there's an association of like people trying to get away with something, do illegal things, whatever it is. And for me, it's more of what I described just moments ago, which is like, I want to be able to just be creative and do things and not necessarily be judged by my background, where I live, my career, or anything. And so I think it's really powerful for people to be able to segment their identity and bring just the relevant aspects of who they are to whatever interest area there is. I will say, when I go to a family gathering or a party with friends or whatever, I don't go into this whole world of Board Elon, right? I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm an angel investor, or I run a gaming company. I keep it real high level because this is not like normal for most people. So I keep that part of my life separate.
That's really funny, actually. And I do agree with you. I mean, that's probably why the PFP collections took off, right? Because it gives you that sense of belonging. You're still part of a community, but it takes away the need to really show who you are beyond the ideas that you're just trying to discuss, which is pretty cool. Have you always had a passion? I know we're getting into gaming. Have you always had a passion for gaming? Did you grow up gaming or getting into technology? How did you get into these industries and like what steered you from like the traditional Web 2 version into like the Web 3 side?
There's a funny story, or or like this like scene that a lot of people can maybe recall when they were kids of them playing video games and then their parents yelling at them, saying like, what do you're spending all this time playing video games. It's not going to help you get a job in the future. Well, for me, it did. I did work at video games, so it was pretty great that I put in all that time playing games. But yeah, I mean, my first console was an Atari 2600, so that gives you a general sense for how old I am. The last console that I purchased was a Nintendo Switch, actually. So I've not gotten the latest Xbox and PlayStations, but yeah, gaming has always been a part of my life. I used to work at game stores, help people find them, and then from a career perspective, I basically came up in my career on the marketing and communication side. And so for me to eventually then be able to do that thing for video game companies that I loved was super rewarding. I think where I became a little bit disenfranchised, and the reason I kind of wanted to move into doing my own thing, was that gaming companies are somewhat risk averse, right? They like to repeat the same formula over and over until they're kind of forced to change. And so as I saw the rapid evolution of blockchain tech, I knew I had to go off and do my own thing and really support companies that were a bit more progressive. But yeah, been a gamer my whole life. I think my biggest challenge now is as you get older, have more responsibilities, all these things, you have less time to actually play video games. So I've recently been helped by things like the Switch and like the Steam Deck, so I can just be with my family and play some games or get an hour in before everybody is, or after everyone's off to sleep. And that's the extent of my gaming instead of like the 8 hours I would put in, per day when I was younger.
I wanted to touch on a few things that you mentioned. Like a lot of people like you said, a lot of people underestimate the mass and the size of gaming, but people don't realize that League of Legends, like the championship of League of Legends, have more viewers than Super Bowl. To put into perspective, gaming is $100 billion industry, and it's interesting that people don't understand. I was interested to hear that you left the gaming industry, and you haven't bought any consoles recently, like in the past, decade or two. And maybe it's because games became too exploitative and too like extractive of the user base. Like they're taking in fiat and giving people this exciting, reveal for a box or for something that creates exclusivity within the game. But then that money is lost, So now maybe I think why you're kind of pivoting towards this is because it's helping you see that value add into building something with your community, being able to offer exclusivity in assets that are able to be liquidated for fiat. And, you can actually move within ecosystems once these gaming metaverses are interoperable, in an ambitious way.
I mean, right? I try to keep this pretty simple, especially when I'm talking to people who are players, gamers who are not as familiar with a lot of the terminology and the jargon. But basically, I grew up in an era when you go to the store, you buy a video game, it's like an actual cartridge or a CD, you played that game, and then if you wanted to, you could trade it in at GameStop or another type of store, or you could sell it to a friend or let them borrow it, but you owned that game, right? Like that physical thing was yours. Somebody obviously, decided to program it, put it on the cartridge, etc. But we moved away from that when people decided that downloading games should be sort of the norm. And people fought that, by the way, for a very long time. Like this idea of I'm not going to own an actual game anymore, like a physical game, and I'm just going to download a file. But when that shift happened, people lost their ability to have ownership of their games. And then if you think about game items, it's the same deal. Like you do not have true ownership of it. Now, that's important for some people. It's not going to be important for everybody. But I think that that's something special, and that's something that the consumer should have the right to do. That all said, I don't want to say that blockchain technology needs to be the entirety of gaming. I think it's going to be a section of gaming. If you think about games like God of War, Elden Ring, you pay $70, you play an awesome game that took people a long time to build, you got enjoyment out of it, that's it. Like you don't need to own stuff, you don't need blockchain, right? Those games are fine. But in certain kind of games where it's, it's a live services game, ongoing, where you're buying in-game items, that's where it starts to make more sense. So there's room for us to preserve traditional video games as they are, and then there's a new genre that will come up that will provide people more ownership.
Yeah, no, definitely. I wanted to mention too, like we're going to get into it, and Lance is going to talk about the traditional gaming aspect, but with these new games that are bringing in traditional gamers, and now with people who have experience in professional gaming, they could win these competitions and win actual prizes that are then the value of those prizes are determined by the market price rather than the company that's giving the prizes. So rather than it just being like a $1 million prize for winning a tournament or 100,000 for a big tournament for gaming, you win this key from Dookie Dash. And then the value of that, you can set your own price, or the community tells you what to set it at, and then that's what it sells for. So it's an interesting concept of using the community and the global gaming community to kind of find value in things that are digital.
Yeah,
it's interesting shit.
And I think that moving away from the idea of here's how much it, this thing in this game costs or is worth is important. If you think about people who collect stuff, whether it's games or cards or, sneakers, most people keep all that stuff on their shelf, right? They're not just like constantly swapping in and out. They just want to display it. So it might be worth exactly like, everybody probably in this space has like $10,000 worth of physical stuff in their house that, if they sell every single thing, they'll get the cash. But to them, what's more important is the thing itself. So I think when it comes to games, it's like, there's this rare item, this rare gun, skin, key, whatever it is. And that's the prize for this competition. And let's talk about that, because if we as a community, if we overemphasize like the fiat value of these prizes and their worth, it's going to destroy us. It's actually going to invite more regulation, and it's also just going to kill the magic of like the point of owning items in games, which is like, I want to show off. I want everybody to know how badass I am, that I accomplish certain things, or I've been playing a long time. That's the point. Yes, liquidity, is important sort of in the back end, but ultimately, this isn't meant to be like the stock market, right? If it is, you could just go trade stocks. You don't need to go play video games. So, that's kind of what I'm trying to do is like use really simple analogies and just remind people of the importance of why players enjoy playing games. The money part will get solved.
It's kind of like exotic cars. Exotic cars where you've got, a high cost item and, you could be buying and selling them. We know people that do that. Or you could just enjoy the car that you've worked for, you've earned it, you know what I mean? So it's kind of that same thing. Like you said, some people just want to show off. They want to have that flashy skin. They want to have those exciting looking guns that are exotic. So it's pretty interesting. It's like the video game version of that.
Yeah, exactly. Like most Rolex owners don't sell their watch. They keep it forever until they're dead.
Exactly. Right. They pass it down. So on the topic, or transitioning to the topic that you want, to BoardBox, you're the co-founder of BoardBox. Can you explain the community, the core values of that project, and the different products that you have, like P64 and Genesis?
Yeah, so BoardBox is definitely a product that is meant for Web3 native people. For now, it's going to expand. But the core problem or premise is that discovering games and buying game items in Web3 kind of sucks right now. Everything basically looks like eBay, like a trading platform. And if you think about how you buy game items today, or how you buy or discover games right now, it looks a lot different. So if you think about something like the Steam store, the Epic Game Store, the PlayStation Network, etc., it's like big featured games showing off why they're awesome. How many people have downloaded it, what type of game it is, story behind the developers, all that stuff. It's not, I'm going to go to a trading platform and see this item and I know how much the floor price is and I know how many people own it. So like no shade against, Magic Eden or OpenSea. These all serve a function, but it's not necessarily a good way to discover brand new games.
Yeah.
So I think the future of Web3 games, you're going to have people buying and discovering in two places. One is if you're already inside of a game, the marketplace is probably going to be inside of the game. You're not going to go outside of it, right? Like you just trade with other players playing the game. That makes a ton of sense. On the flip side, if you are looking for new games, you're probably not going to find them on a trading platform. And so BoardBox is meant to be a storefront similar to like, if anyone's familiar with a GameStop, the old school physical store, that's us. Like we're trying to help people find new games to play. We're not listing or curating every single game that exists like a search. It is game companies that we want to highlight, that we think are doing something special. And so what we've built is a membership, a gaming membership. So basically, if you hold a BoardBox NFT, you're earning points every single day. It just passively grows as you hold our NFT. And then you can trade those points in for whatever game items are listed in our store. Very similar to like an airline points program or a hotel points program. You basically have to decide what game items are worthwhile enough for you to spend your points on. And in doing so, we're introducing people to brand new games. So instead of being sort of like a P2P marketplace where you're buying stuff from somebody else, you're buying everything from us. And for game studios, this business has been really powerful because they want real players. The problem that almost every single game studio we talk to tells me is that there's too many people who are flipping NFTs, they're being degens, they're being traders, and that's fine, I do it too. But like that person is not a quality customer for a video game. A video game maker wants you to be playing their game for 10 years. And so if you're constantly distracted by like trading JPEGs, that doesn't make that you're already playing that game. That's a very distracting game. So what we've done is we've been able to find real players who are interested in games. Part of that was accomplished by a fairly high-priced NFT when we first launched. And the other is we just talk about games and we don't talk about investments and prices and all that stuff. And so we naturally just attract people who are real players. So yeah, in terms of our product lineup, we have two NFT, consoles. These are virtual, digital objects that we've released. The first was the Genesis box, and the second was the B64, which was lovingly inspired by a Nintendo console that you probably could figure out. And so those were fairly high priced items because we wanted to bring in core gamers who had money to spend. And as our business evolves, we're going to release more accessibly priced products that help people accrue boredom as well. And we'll even start selling stuff at ETH soon in our store. And so the evolution of BoardBox, eventually where we want to go, is it's going to be the first place people stop to find new game items before they go to all the trading platforms. And so far, we've had a lot of success. It's a wonderful community. And as blockchain gaming grows, we believe we have a powerful chance of becoming one of the main players in that space.
It's awesome. Awesome.
Congratulations. It sounds like you've done a lot of work on building that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great to see it.
Hell yeah. No, I could imagine. How important are, in your opinion, I think we can all agree they probably are, but these strategic partnerships, if you're working with different gaming companies or different metaverse projects, like how are you leveraging these collaborations to either amplify gaming initiatives that you are interested in, or just bringing more awareness to these games? I mean, like you said, you've got your community. How do you find these companies, or you approach, like, is it just you've played their game, you want to get involved with it? How does that work?
I think the great thing about the culture of Web3 is that collaboration is the default. If you think about the traditional video games industry, there are rare examples of cross IP and cross collaboration. Super Smash Brothers, for example, or Fortnite brings in characters from other places, and players love it. They love seeing characters that are from different organizations all in the same place. But it is definitely an exception.
I used to love Marvel versus
great early
Capcom.
example, 100%. And so those make players really happy. And so, but it's hard, right? Because there's a lot of lawyers involved and licensing and all this stuff. Like, you can imagine how hard it is actually to produce a game like Super Smash Brothers, where you're bringing in characters from like 30 different games. It's a lot of work. So in Web3, it's just kind of the norm. Like, yeah, we want to basically have everybody working together, and a rising tide lifts all ships. Now, as this gets bigger and bigger, will there be more competition and maybe a bit more of a hesitation to just like bring other people's IP into your game? Maybe, probably. But for now, it's really important. So yeah, on our end, in terms of working with different game studios, it's kind of a 50-50 split. So half of it is our team is just scouting constantly for game studios that are, worth our attention. And because of my experience in the gaming industry, when we meet with studios and we talk to people who want to build a game, I have a pretty strong nose for, who's going to be able to do something, right? Like, have they made a game before? What is their background? What type of game are they trying to build? And does blockchain even make sense for it? So we we almost approach it like a venture capitalist. Like we interview game studios before we work with them in a deep way, because we want to make sure that we don't recommend games that end up being, at worst a rug, or at best, they just never get built. Like that's a bummer for everybody. So, and that's why we don't sell every single game item, right? From every game, we sell what we want. And then the other half of recommendations just comes from, people in our community, or we work with a game studio and they recommend another game studio. And eventually we want to get to the point where, we're just overwhelmed with recommendations because there's so many great games out there. But for now, we're able to manage it with a fairly small team. And thus far, I will say, anecdotally, we've met with a lot of game studios who have told us that our partnership with them has brought them the highest quality player who holds assets the longest and is most engaged than any other partner that they've worked with. So we've been really proud of what we've been able to bring game studios, because we're solving a huge problem for them, which I mentioned earlier, but user acquisition of quality players.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. And on the topic of like gaming studios that you can trust in, I see that you really heavily invested into and convicted into Yuga, and storytelling is becoming a huge component in NFT communities. If you look at Yuga and all the lore that they've created around, Bored Ape, mutants, the codas, the deeds, there's a lot of things coming out and a lot of sub communities that are forming because of these different digital asset groups. So how do you think that NFTs and digital ownership, like the formation of a video game coming after the community has built through the NFT scenario, how do you think that pushes, gaming and blockchain-based gaming in the future? How do you think that intertwines?
I think that, you always have to think about, how does this technology help the experience? Why does it make it better? Otherwise, there's no point of just slapping it on.
Yeah.
I think that, so like one stat that I've been thinking a lot about is the amount of money that is spent on in-game assets. So you mentioned $100 billion is like the overall, video games market. The stat I have is 200 billion, but either way, pretty big number. Oh, okay, got it. Perfect. So yeah, 200 billion as of right now is the stat I've been looking at. But about $65 billion is spent on in-game items and in-game purchases. So this is people spending money to basically upgrade their game experience, and they don't, that's it. Like they don't own anything. They just did that for the amusement of it. So imagine how much money will be spent if they actually get to own it and they can trade it and sell it. So that's really important. But then how does it actually improve the game experience? So I think like the really simple example I love to use is this idea of like losing your game items, right? Or actually having it die. So a really popular genre people have been exploring for NFT or blockchain games is this idea of extraction. So there's two games out there that are being built. One is called DeadDrop and another is called Shrapnel. And both of these games basically have you go into an environment, collect a bunch of stuff, and if you die, you lose all that stuff. If you live, you keep it, and it's actually stuff you can sell on the open market. So that makes it really exciting. Like that actually makes somebody at home who's watching a Twitch stream a lot more entertained. Like imagine all the people who watch League of Legends, and that's a very massive number of people. But imagine like the losing team would lose their character scans and all the stuff in that matchup, and the winning team would actually get to take it away from the people they beat. Now, not everybody is going to be like happy playing that game because they don't want to lose their stuff, but that sure is entertaining if you're if you're watching along. It's very similar to fantasy sports, right? Like fantasy football, soccer, basketball. You put a little money into playing, into players, and basically every time something happens, there's something attached to it. That just makes the game more entertaining. And it's not about gambling. It's just about having some sort of feeling of like skin in the game that makes it more interesting. So that's the fundamental thing that's going to change and why this technology is useful for video games. And there's all sorts of other use cases like accomplishments. If you're the first person to kill a boss in a game in under an hour, you get a trophy, and everybody knows that you're the first person who did it. And these are things that are all on chain. So people will continue to expand on like how to use this technology. But fundamentally, the really basic one is basically like you just have ownership of stuff that you've earned, and you can do whatever you want with it.
While we're on that topic, I know Mo brought up like the key from Dookie Dash earlier. Obviously now there's these different power sources that are going to turn into mechas. Some of them have companions, and that's just Yuga Labs and what they're working on within that Bored Ape community. But do you see these metaverses or other games? Do you think this is a good way to bridge that gap with traditional gamers and like the Web3 degens, kind of, that they see this kid Mongraal winning this key, being able to sell it for thousands of Ethereum, $1 million. Do you see that as a good way that also brings in traditional gamers and more eyes on these types of platforms?
I think that the general premise is appealing, but I think that in the example of Dookie Dash, right, there was one big prize, and you kind of know that that's going to go to somebody who is either really good at gaming or is a pro, and that's basically what happened. So like esports is a good example. There are very few people who can compete for prize pools in esports because you just have to be at a level that most people will never achieve, and therefore as somebody at home, you're maybe never going to try. Now what I would do is I would rather, as a game publisher, put out 5,000 prizes that are smaller than one giant prize that only goes to one person, because then you have lots of players who want to participate, everyday people who are just playing video games for fun. And I do think that to some degree, Yuga has done that. And with OTHERSIDE and what they're sort of revealing over the last few weeks, you're going to see how, the everyday player is going to be able to like get some cool stuff for the game. And that's going to attract, I think, a broader audience. So I think that strategy makes sense. But they wanted to do one big prize to get some news coverage, and I think they accomplished that.
Yeah, and then even in this last trip, they had people who had deeds were able to bring a guest. They just tried to expand the network, and they're creating an environment that in terms of gaming quality, how would you, with your gaming experience, with what you've seen from the other side and the trips that we've gone on, the quality of the game, the development, the back end, everything, how does that compare with some of the top games in Web2 gaming and traditional gaming? How do you see that playing out?
I think that, relative to the overall library of Web3 games, that what the other side is doing is pretty impressive. I think the most impressive thing for me is what they have released in terms of concurrent players in one space. For anybody who didn't, go on the other side journey, basically it was thousands and thousands of people all operating, in the same place. And this is something you might have experienced at a smaller level in Fortnite, where there's like 100 people, but to do it with thousands and thousands is really cool. Fidelity wise, graphics wise, they're probably building something that you would see launch in 2015. It's like 5 years behind, but that's okay. I mean, not every game has to be hyper realistic. Like Nintendo is a good example of that. Like Breath of the Wild is one of the best games of all time. And it's not necessarily the most graphically intense. So it comes down to gameplay and storytelling and character, and that's fine. And I think that other sites do it, Yuga overall is doing a good job. They're balancing a lot of IP, and a lot of the expectations are very high. So that's a difficult place to be, but clearly they've attracted a very wide audience, and I wish them well, right? I think right now they're carrying the torch for the overall space, and everybody wants them to succeed.
Yeah, and I think that's important to highlight, that when Fortnite launched, the quality of Fortnite compared to what it is today, where they have a full freaking city, like a full mega city, or what they call it, where there's, it's very, very detailed. When they first launched, Fortnite didn't have that many guns, did not have that many features. It was very, with the times, right? And it's okay to have that not very hyper realistic phase, but they've evolved over the years because people demand more and more and more. But the Yuga community, they have a lot of anticipation from their community based on the hype that they've been building for years. So it's interesting to see all the sub companies and different entities forming under the Yugaverse. Like, let's take ApeCoin DAO. Let's talk about ApeCoin DAO for instance. And for those who don't know what DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations. And it's basically like a democratized economy or government where everybody can vote depending on their proportion and ownership over the DAO. So what do you think about DAOs, and how do these systems play a role in gaming? Can you elaborate on ApeCoin and describe how that's going to intertwine?
Yeah, I think DAOs for gaming really can operate as what guilds used to be. So guilds were games that were really popular in the days of World of Warcraft, where you had to coordinate with a large group of people to accomplish a goal. It might be raiding a castle or going into battle. And basically, like, you did it as a group to maximize your chances of winning and getting the spoils. And I think that model of coordination is where DAOs can play a role, because DAOs are things that let you vote. They let you propose ideas, and they let you basically, coordinate action. So for gaming, it makes a ton of sense. You could even apply it to like ownership of things inside of games. Like, imagine the same way that like a really rich person can own a soccer team. You could have a DAO that owns an esports team, or even like characters inside of a game. And so it's not a rich person on their own who does it. It's like 1,000 people who have pooled their resources. So there's a lot of fun that can be had. Yeah. Outside of gaming, DAOs have interesting use cases, whether it's for decentralized finance or, voting on how a project moves. I think there's a lot to be explored there and how to make it sort of truly fair. But for gaming, I think it's probably for me the most interesting use case, because it is ultimately just like finding a way to get 100 or 1,000 people to move in unison to accomplish something fun and good for the group.
It's kind of like a company doesn't, a gaming company doesn't have to build. I feel like in the past they've had to have full games built, right before you have to have the product release, you have to have everything done without the feedback of a lot of your community members. So now it's like, since you build the community first, you can, with DAOs, like through voting proposals and things like that, the company itself can propose, AIPs and these proposals that people can vote on, and kind of help steer you in the right direction as a company, and it helps you build the company for you.
Yeah, that's the beauty of Web3. Obviously there's like a fine balance between how much, of the game is developed by like the actual developers and how much input they take in from the players. But every game studio will find that balance. And I think ultimately, like what I experienced in the traditional games world is game studios that opened up their alphas and their betas really early, took feedback, and then implemented changes in the games. With those players who like know that they contributed to that game, they become the loudest advocates when that game goes live. They recruit hundreds of their friends. They're proud. They feel like they're a part of it. It's really special to them. And so that's probably the best reason. It's obviously the feedback is also great, but just getting all these people who feel like stakeholders in the game. With that, of course, comes a bit of annoyance, because you're going to get people who are angry that maybe they didn't get listened to, or maybe their ideas honestly were just not good and it got voted down. But hey, that's democracy, right? Like, people propose ideas and some get through and some don't, and you have to manage that. But I think that it's a superior model versus like the sole game developer who has this vision, and then they put out a game and nobody can provide any input. Like, there are a few people on Earth who can pull that off, that have earned the right to do that. But most game developers, I think, who are starting off, they want input, they want the community to play a role.
Yeah, definitely. And I saw that you were involved with Shrapnel board, and ironically, I consulted an angel investor who was investing into Shrapnel like 8 months ago, 8 months to a year ago, and so I got the whole rundown on Shrapnel. It was a really, really interesting ecosystem. So I'd love maybe if you want to kind of summarize that. I know that you're building maybe a community for your B64 Genesis holders to have something with items, exclusive wearables within this metaverse of Shrapnel.
Yeah, I mean, so I am an angel investor in Shrapnel, so I'll just put that out there, that obviously I would like them to succeed. But it's a great game. I mean, I invested in them because they have a really strong team with a track record in gaming and film. Yeah, I actually played a demo of it last week when I was at the Game Developers Conference, and was really impressed by the progress they've made, and also their willingness to just show off a game that's so early in development. But I mean, from a board box perspective, we've done a partnership with Shrapnel, which was getting some of their items in the hands of our players, and that brought them a great set of new participants and fans. And ultimately, what we like to do on the board box side is not just get assets from games to distribute out to quality players, but actually do branding integrations where we have custom board box items inside of games. And we've actually done that with like 10 games now, where there is board branding inside of the game itself. And that's been fun to see. We have not done that with Shrapnel, but maybe I will nudge them again to do that, since you just gave me the idea.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. That's awesome.
So you've grown your Twitter account to nearly 2 million followers. You've got this whole community with with B64 and the Genesis box. Can you kind of touch on the journey of building that community or that network? I mean, obviously it's very valuable. Like you said, you're able to bring these users to these companies that are looking for that and their quality. So what was that journey like? And then would you give like advice to people that want to build their social media presences, but like thoughtfully, without just doing, oh, we're going to give this away, we're just going to, you know what I mean? Like without being too cash grabby about it.
You you will build the audience. The quality of the audience you build will just really depend on what you offer them. And if you offer people a bunch of free stuff, you're going to get some low quality users probably, right? Because there's just people who want free stuff to trade in and make money. But in my case, it was really just consistency and a little bit of luck. But when I started building my community, it was just diligently putting content out there every single day that I thought was clever, that I put time into thinking through, and it made people laugh. I mean, the internet, it makes winners out of people who either make you really, really happy or really, really angry. That's basically, unfortunately, where we're at. And I didn't want to make people angry, so I just made people smile. And I was parodying a guy, when I started at least, who was rising up in visibility. You know, even 10 years ago, Elon was pretty famous, and he's gotten even more famous since then. Arguably one of like the top 3 most famous people on earth right now. And so that was luck, right? Like I couldn't have predicted that. But what I will say is that the account is my 10th attempt at a parody account. So like I tried 9 other parody accounts before I hit the board Elon Musk idea. And so back to this idea that I mentioned earlier of like not being afraid to look stupid or try different things, my experimentation is what led me to, finding success with this character. And so I was, fortunate that my content really got picked up by a lot of people in Silicon Valley and tech in general. And I maintained a really strict policy with board Elon Musk, like until about 7 or 8 years into the account. I never made money on it. I was building trust. I was building credibility. I didn't as soon as I hit 100,000 followers, I didn't want to cash in and start doing promoted tweets or something like that. And I think because I went so long not cashing in on this community, I developed a really strong level of trust, and more people decided to, follow me and want to participate in what I was building. And so I pivoted after about 8 years away from this one-dimensional character that made a lot of people happy and started to be more of me, and started to use board Elon Musk account for promoting my businesses. And it's a hard shift, right? Because a lot of people followed me and got used to me being a certain type of identity. And then when I decided to be something else, not everybody who originally joined my community was into gaming or was into blockchain. So that's fine. I probably lost a few people along the way, but I decided that after being this character for a very long time, I wanted to just do something different. And to be honest, my follow count has been flat for at least a year. I'm not gaining a lot of new followers anymore. And that's okay. My ego doesn't need it. I've achieved what I needed to. I've reached the level of play in this video game of Twitter where I'm happy and I'm an OG and I don't need to keep going. So I'd rather just have fun and do what I want to do with this thing. And not have to be subject to algorithms and worrying about my engagement. I don't care anymore. I've achieved the status that I need to, and I'm happy.
Hell yeah. Can I ask you a question? I used to have, before I had freelance, I used to be Elon Musk's chain
really
link
specific
node. People messaging the account thinking that Elon Musk was actually behind it, and they would be asking for money, or they'd be telling me about their illnesses, or they would be offering invention ideas. One guy had a solar powered rocket ship that was going to take us all around the universe. And all these other, fantastic ideas that they would message that they think they're sending to Elon Musk. Do you get those type of interactions?
Yeah, whatever
as well?
You got, imagine that times 100. Definitely. A lot of, women who want to go on dates, people who want money, people complaining about their Tesla and wanting me to escalate it for them. Just crazy stuff. I think, honestly, it was actually a lot worse before I started doing podcasts and Twitter Spaces and sharing my voice, because I think legitimately 30% of my following thought it was really Elon. And part of the problem was that in 2018, he tweeted, board Elon Musk is actually my secret troll account. And because people don't understand sarcasm, they thought that was real. and they didn't understand it was a joke. And so, yeah, that caused a lot of confusion. It was cool that he did that and he gave me a shout out. But yeah, since I've been sharing my voice a lot more, I think people have figured out that I am not, in fact, Elon Musk, and the emails have slowed down a little bit.
Nice.
It's interesting too, because you were saying that like that people on the internet are either looking for something to make them really happy or really angry, right? And then it's almost like when you had to stop appealing to them and always creating funny content to make other people happy, and you started making yourself happy by doing things that benefited your life more and your happiness, then you started losing followers because you're making them angry because you're becoming happy. And it's an interesting flow of how, like, you know, Twitter could be ruthless sometimes, and a lot of people know that and have that bad taste about, you know, Twitter is like, people are very judgmental and critical, and it's just the internet, man. You know, if you were in a Modern Warfare 2 lobby back then, you knew that, you know, this world is dark. This world, there's some people that just want to inflict harm on you, and if there's no repercussions physically, you know, internet warriors, keyboard warriors, they're okay with just letting it eat, you know, because there's no backlash.
And that is honestly, when you think about your free time, why I push people towards spending time in gaming versus in social media, because I think social media leans more towards anger and conflict, and video games lean more towards joy. Like, obviously you could play games where you're fighting people, but it's still meant to be fun. It's still meant to be enjoyable. And you can turn off all the, you know, the voice chats and get away from any trolls. But like, I think it's better for people's mental health. I mean, a lot of people argue that, you know, video games are not good for kids, but I think if you're picking between your kid spending 2 hours building cool stuff in Minecraft versus 2 hours like scrolling through TikTok, I'm gonna push them towards Minecraft. I think that at least they're using their imagination and coordinating with friends and all that stuff. So yeah, that's why I think that's something really that is important. And to your original point, I don't necessarily want to make people angry. I want to make people laugh or think. And ultimately, it's almost like a relationship. Like, yeah, when you go on a first date, you're sort of pretending to be somebody you're not because you want to impress somebody. I'm past that point, right? Like, I don't need to impress anybody. If you love me, you'll just follow my account for me. And if you don't, I don't really care to impress you anymore.
Awesome. Good. That's how it should be.
Hell yeah. I saw a tweet you made, a little unrelated here, but you said having a second computer is better than a hardware wallet. As someone who's been in crypto for a long time, I actually agree with you very much on this point. Do you keep it air gapped, or do you keep it disconnected, or how do you manage security on a separate device like that?
So
for crypto alone?
I think fundamentally the biggest problem right now with crypto scams is not technology, but it's just humans making mistakes. It's clicking the wrong button, and it's social engineering. So to fix that problem, which is like 99% of how hacks happen, just have a computer that you don't normally use every day, that you use for specific financial transactions. If you want to be extreme about it and don't have it connected to the internet, or you want to keep it in a safety deposit box at a bank or whatever, or in a bunker, cool, that's an extra nice layer. But generally speaking, I just think, you remove the option for human error, your error, if you just have a totally separate computer for like high stakes transactions and assets. And to me, things like ledgers are cool, but it's like, I can spend $300 on that, or I can buy a nice laptop, or a good enough laptop for $500. And to me, somehow that feels safer. I still feel uneasy about the lack of control you have over a hardware wallet. If it breaks or whatever, to me, it feels like an elaborate piece of paper with a seed phrase on it. And, you know, I'd rather just use the piece of paper locked away somewhere in a computer than a hardware wallet. That's my personal opinion. I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but a lot of people seem to agree with that thought.
It's an interesting thought. Definitely. A lot of people, you know, just having a hardware wallet for one, you know, a lot of people keep valuable assets on a hot wallet or connect their MetaMask to their phone. And, you know, I had a dear friend who, you know, got hacked for over 50 ETH in assets because their Apple ID got hacked, and the Apple ID had because they were signed into MetaMask on their phone with their hot wallet, their keychain was saved, that the password was saved. So all they needed to do was look into their cloud, and they had everything backed up in the cloud under their Apple ID, find the passcode, like go into the MetaMask, and then just ship everything out. And it was was crazy how quickly that happened, man, and how devastating that could be for somebody who doesn't even know that they did something wrong or think that they did something wrong, but it's like just these extra precautions that could just help in the event that some bullshit happens, right?
It's unfortunate, and that is preventing a lot of people from wanting to join this space because it is real. And so that's going to have to continue to be a priority for companies like MetaMask, is how do you protect people? Because there's no insurance, right? Like if somebody, steals your credit card, you're not going to be liable for those charges, but that is not the case with crypto. So it's a little bit of a different world, and it's a trade-off people are making for true ownership and decentralization, but it does come with a lot of challenges.
Yep, definitely. The responsibility for decentralization is separating from regulators means you don't have the safety net of them if you, with self-custody, make an error as a human. Like you really have to be careful managing your money if you have it in self-custody. So definitely. And there's different protocols like Wallet Guard and different extensions that are coming out, which for reading contracts and interacting with different minting sites and different things like that, it reads the contract that you're signing and helps you visualize them in, legible, like real English words, right? And those are the types of platforms that we need to be highlighting too through the podcast and then online on Twitter. So it's good to see people fighting for it, helping people. Elon, thanks for joining us. I think this was a great discussion. Lance, do you have anything else to discuss, or do you want to discuss anything else?
On my end, I appreciate the great conversation, the variety of topics. For anyone listening, I'm very approachable and accessible on Twitter. Anybody who replies to me or asks a question, I usually try to answer it. On our end, on the Boardbox side, I'm always looking for game recommendations. So if anybody is, playing a game or looking at a game in Web3 that they think is super cool, please flag it for me. I'm always interested in learning about new teams. So that would mean a lot to me. And I hope that everybody listening considers creating a membership on the boardbox.io website. There is a free version, and if you connect your email, you'll get 2 points per week that you start earning, and hopefully you can use that to buy an item someday.
Thank you for joining us, and for everybody listening, like and subscribe. We're going to get more guests as valuable as Board. Well, what a great conversation. Thank you again for joining us, Board.
Follow us on the Web3 experience. Follow Board at Board
Elon Musk on Twitter for now until I change that.
Yep.
Gotcha.